Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Tuesday budget workshop for June 14th, 2022. It is 9:02, and we're going to get started. Let the record reflect that all three commissioners are present and our executive management team. And we'll turn it over to Gary.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, the purpose of this workshop specifically is to finalize the specifics that is to be incorporated in the budget letter, which is the kickoff letter for the 23 budget. And if you'll remember how we last left off, there was some dialogue concerning a lot of different peripheral items and what should be included and what should not. But if we return our focus to the main core of the letter, Gina, could you put the draft of that letter up?
That's last year's. Ron, could you put the Word document on?
Oh, the Word.
Draft.
So in this letter, we're specifically pointing out that we would like to see the M&O budget increase by no more than 3%.
And where do you state that?
Jason, did you save a different one out there?
Yeah, I didn't see that written in the draft that was sent to us.
Yeah, it's not here.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's implied.
Okay, well, that's one of the things that we would suggest
will
in
put
the
in there.
draft, that we begin by asking each department to closely review their controllable expenditures and encourage departments not to exceed the 2022 M&O levels. If you are increasing your M&O budget by more than 3%, please explain in detail the reason or reasons for the increase.
That's a great sentence. Can we put that in here?
Perfect, yeah.
Okay.
Here, let me read
that letter or not? That one. Yeah, I'll send it. Okay.
Send it to Ron.
So we're replacing that letter.
So, because then based on the letter that we have here too, I mean, having that percentage in there is going to be key, as well as I think we need to state why we're doing that. Due to rising inflation, due to, unanticipated, unfunded mandates, kind of similar to what we did in last year's budget. We talked about our letter, it's not because of COVID anymore, but it's, we're still getting more unfunded mandates coming down from the state that are affecting our budget. We've got rising inflation, so we don't know what our future sales tax numbers potentially are.
So, do we run the risk of department head coming back and saying, well, inflation is running at 8.6%. You're only going to give us 3%. What do we do with the other 5% kind of a deal? And how do we want to respond to that? Here, I'm just asking the question because I anticipate that some of the department heads are going, well, you ought to raise us 8.6% because that's the real inflationary rate, but that's tied to housing and a bunch of other stuff that we don't deal with here. So, I mean, you could make an argument that, maybe some of those inflationary factors, things we don't have any control over, like gas and housing and all that kind of stuff, and that we think that the real cost for us here locally is just 3%. I mean, we could make that argument. I'm just trying to anticipate what the response might be if we tie it to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're just giving, I guess it's why are we choosing 3%? I mean, I think we talked somewhat a little bit about that earlier, but I mean, gas is already, people's gas budgets are already out of whack this year, let alone for next year. So we know that that's going to be.
Did you want to raise the percentage?
No,
No.
I don't. I want him to be able to defend it.
Here's something to think about. What we had conceptually talked about last time on this topic was, in order for the commissioners to have a clear view across all the departments and the expense budgets, we need to have a starting point. And the starting point creates a framework of saying, listen, when you're budgeting, it's a flatline budget for your FTEs. And it's a X% increase for your non-personnel expenses. That allows us to have some sort of structure around how the budget's going to roll up. Then where departments believe they need an additional justified FTE or additional justified expenses higher than the 3% cap, they have an opportunity to submit them through a supplemental budget format that once the roll-up occurs, you are all able to see what the general fund roll-up is. What are our revenues? What are our expenses? Are we over? Are we under? And if we're managing a very deliberate increase in our expenses, it hopefully allows us to get to a point where we have a little bit of wiggle room in our revenues over expenditures. And then you can all start looking at the supplemental budget request and make individual prioritized decisions off those stuff. Otherwise, if we just open it wide open, we run the risk, as we have in the past, of getting out of the gate with a $5 million, $3 million, $8 million shortfall.
So a suggestion would be in an effort to contribute to controlling the rate of inflation, we want to hold the line at 3% and not contribute to the pressures that our citizens are experiencing through federal uncontrolled inflation, or something like that, that would give us, if I think it's more sympathetic to the voter to say, we want to try and curb inflation, and here's how we're going to play our role in that.
Yep.
I think that plays better with the public, because obviously this letter is going to be public.
Yep.
So just offer that for your consideration to
I have
say,
a question as well.
yes,
But-
go ahead.
So, because as you tie that in, I think the question is gonna be with wages, right? Because that's gonna be, I think, the biggest inflation item for our
Yeah.
budgets.
Yeah,
So to your point, based on how the department heads are going to be getting these budgets, are those wage increases already baked in, right?
Yes,
Because,
right.
so including a COLA, so we're
Yes.
baking in a COLA.
For all agreed to
But
contracts.
what about our non-reps?
That is something that the board would make a decision on and give us direction on.
I think that's the question that's also gonna come out of this, right? Is
But
We
we've
have-
not made a decision on a COLA.
right, but as the letters go up, maybe if you talk to that in the letter as well, because I think that's gonna be your guys' question, not just from your department heads, but from the public potentially as well, is where are we likely going to see the largest impact of budget with inflation? Well, it's probably wages is a huge chunk of it, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so
yeah.
how do you guys in this letter as well potentially address that side of it? I hear what you're saying, but I think the other side of that is, where do you have this conversation about how budgeting for wages as related to inflation is going to be impacted in this decision?
So my response would be, department heads, these are your employees, this is your budget. How do you plan on addressing within your budget the wage pressure that we're experiencing so that we can continue to provide a service to the public? And then if they come back and say, you know what, there's absolutely no way for me to do this, then we fall back into Scott's court and say, okay, let's talk about a supplemental then. Because some of the departments, as I remember, a couple of the departments got more than 3% increase because we were trying to catch up to market and stuff. And so we're catching up to market, and now you're going to punish me. That can be confusing.
Yeah.
So how do we address that? Well, maybe that's something we do in the supplemental.
Yeah, we're giving them an opportunity to still create awareness around what pressures they're seeing, what cost increases they're experiencing, what personnel growth they think they might need to incur to be able to meet the service levels that the community is expecting. And so we're not blocking that. We're just saying, hey, we've got to have at least a clear picture on the front end as these are rolling up to then know what our choices are. Because otherwise everyone makes the choices and then you're having to face a deficit and go through and cut back. I'd rather start with a baseline manageable budget that you can strategically go in and make decisions on where we can and how much we have to invest more, where we can invest more. The 3%, whether it's 3, 4, or 5, I would say the 3% is a defendable one. If you look at a 25-year CPI, we're about 3%. That's what we historically run at. Yep, we are absolutely seeing some large inflationary numbers this year, but we don't know if those are going to continue in next year, the year after. So we don't want to necessarily build in one year only that has a compounding effect in the out years. I think we want to do, to your point, Commissioner, what we can do to try to manage those and curb that inflationary number. Again, recognizing that if there are some that are uncontrollable within your budget, there's an opportunity to do that within the supplemental ask. It's just not embedded within your baseline budget.
See, and I see, I would not be surprised that 2023 looks like 2011. Where, we're coming out of the recession, but we weren't coming out of it fast enough. Revenues weren't matching our expenses. And we ended up having to go to the employees and say, we got a choice to make. We can either lay you off or we can freeze wages. And, to the credit of the unions, God bless them, they said, freeze our wages. We don't want to lose any of our friends at work. And we did that for several years, and then we had to catch up. I would not be surprised that see 23, 24 in the same situation where, we're confronted with the real choice of, what. It was interesting, and Josh, weigh in here, when we were at the Japanese embassy. Well, you were there too. When we were at the Japanese embassy, they were talking about a shortage of labor. And so what they were aggressively doing was wherever possible, they were replacing people with robotics. And they weren't eliminating jobs by robotics. What they were doing is replacing people with robotics. And so that's their labor future is, going more to robotics and software and other things and eliminating jobs because they don't have people to fill the jobs. Maybe that's part of our future as well. I don't know.
We've got open positions here that we're unable to fill.
Yeah.
And we're no different than any other company in this region and nationally around. People have jobs. Companies have jobs, organizations have jobs. There aren't bodies to fill these jobs. And yet our community still expects the services to be delivered to them. So I think it does call for us to continue to look at how do we meet that gap where there's still a need for providing the services.
Some generalizations you might want to make in the letter is that we have uncertainty regarding future revenues. And that we do have an expectation of an increase in unfunded mandates also. So I don't know how deeply you want to drill into the inflationary aspect of things, but those are other aspects that can be tied in within the letter.
My suspicion is the unions are gonna bring up the inflationary aspects, if not department heads.
I think it's a reality we're all facing today. We're not going to
Yeah.
escape it.
I'd rather just go ahead and address it on our terms than to leave it out there and leave it for other people to interpret.
So what would you like incorporated into the letter for inflation?
Your
I,
wisdom.
I liked what Al first stated. I thought was pretty good, but then as this, and Al, maybe you can repeat it. It was your first your kind of first stab at the inflation sentence. I thought was pretty good, but no, as this conversation has continued, I mean, I think what was just stated about we don't know what next year is going to be like when it comes to our revenue. I mean, we know what it is for property tax. I mean, that's very steady. But we don't know what's going to happen due to inflationary pressures, due to everything else that's going on. We don't know what the sales tax is going to be like. I mean, that just come right out and state that. I mean, with the uncertainty of everything going on around inflation, we don't know what sales tax revenue is going to look like in 2022. So we need to proceed cautiously.
I think we can go down the line with real estate excise tax, the housing market's volatile right now. Interest rates are rising. There's likely going to be a slowdown of purchasing of construction, which means there's less inventory being turned, less purchases being made, less excise taxes to be coming. I think that's pretty easy to see on the horizon.
It's much better for us to be cautious than bullish on something like this and have to come back and do a supplemental to start cutting a bunch of stuff because the money didn't come in. So
I think I said, in an effort to curb inflationary pressures on our citizens, we want to hold the line for cost increases for next year to 3%. Is that captured, Josh?
I think that's good to have that sentence in there, but then, something about, what was stated about, we don't know what, we don't know what the sales tax generation is going to be. So I mean, essentially what Scott just stated. So, and then I'd say the letter's good as far as I'm concerned.
What do you think, Mary?
Well, I think we have to make the case as to why we're asking for 3% and that we do think that, we know we have rising inflation. So we know they're gonna have to look at what that means in their departments. We know that, we still have some units that have bargained that we've got to put in for what we think that bargaining is gonna be. I mean, we still have to anticipate. I don't want to be where we were last year and didn't even anticipate it until it was set. We know what we think approximately is going to be. So we have to have that in there. It doesn't have to be in this letter, but I mean, we've got to be setting ourselves up for a realistic budget. And then the whole discussion of COLA on top of that is, I don't know, is still something we've got to discuss. But I mean, we don't have enough numbers at this point in time to have that discussion yet.
And I think with
Just a second, and I do think, since we know like on rising gas prices, I'd like to kind of see what we think that additional budget this year is for that. To know what we think it's going to be for next year. Because I think we need to already start to address that as can they absorb that within their budget or not? And so I think they're going to be looking to the commissioners to make that decision and sooner than later. So I know that that's an increase, but I think a lot of those departments should be able to absorb it. So I think as this letter goes out, we're going to be getting that pushback because I'm already hearing from a couple departments on that we need to be able to start to address that as well.
Well, I mean, on the good news side of it, though, we know that our sheriff deputies are using a lot less gas in pursuit because they can't do pursuit anymore.
That
So-
can really accelerate that
Yeah, so I mean,
to go chase.
just
Al can find the silver lining in anything.
one of the opportunities by, again, trying to hold our budget growth to a 3% level and a flat FT and being able to make choices is it then gives you an opportunity to see what can be accomplished with COLAs, what can be absorbed with the COLAs for our non-reps. By building something and it gives you no ability to go, what is the impact of that? Do we have the ability to absorb that? But knowing that that's something that when we get to the roll-up stage, we now have an idea of, okay, is there an opportunity to absorb a COLA for our non-reps, recognizing we need to keep pace with market that's growing and changing rapidly in front of us. But I think leaving that as we know that's an item that we're going to need to plug in. We just don't know yet how much. And to Commissioner Cuny's point is until we have some roll-ups, until we have some projections, don't really have a decision point to be able to make on that. But don't want to lose sight of the fact that we need to make sure we're keeping that in the forefront as we're moving through the roll-ups.
And I am working on that right now as well. So commissioners, what I've been, and my team has been working on is looking at inflation numbers over not just the past, but even where we're at now, where have our wages been in the past, what happened with the mapping to the comp study or the class study. So I'll have all of that hopefully in the next couple of weeks ready to compile, and then we can discuss it. But that way, really just giving a clear picture of where are we, where have we been, and where do we think we need to go based on what we're seeing, as well as looking at all of the negotiated contracts. Where did they land? How does that tie into the rate of inflation so that you guys have a full picture of, you know, what's happening in the COLA and the wages world as we start looking at that.
But the other thing that will happen is if we are officially or unofficially going into recession, the job market is going to change dramatically. And it'll shift from employee driven to employer driven and stuff. And so that's going to help in terms of some of the pressures we've experienced and stuff as well. So some of the bonuses that we've been paying for hire and stuff, that I fully expect that will go away. Because we'll probably have more employees, more potential employees than less.
So I'm a fan of being pretty direct in the letter, so there's no lack of clarity as to what we're asking for. So I'm going to propose something and see how it resonates with all of you. But I would say it's not an ask of 3%. It will be capped at no more than 3%. And rather than a try to hold your FTEs, it is you'll budget flat with your FTEs from your 2022 budget. That sounds very directive, but I believe by giving them our department heads and other electeds the pressure valve of saying there's an opportunity through the supplemental budget ask. It's not going to be part of your budget that you're submitting, but it won't be part of the into Questica, into our system, but it will be a supplemental budget ask that you can have in there that gives an opportunity to highlight some of those things. So it's very direct in saying what we're going to prescribe in the budget, so that the budget office, when they're looking at the roll-ups, they can say, are they within 3% or not? And are they flatline FTEs or not? And then still have the opportunity to make a case for additional needs within the budget.
So what would be the time measurement date on that, Scott? For instance, when we're saying flat FTE count, would that be as of January 1st, 2022, or as of today? Or we've got to have a benchmark to measure it again.
So you guys do 1950. No.
Well, you see the numbers, Gary. What would
So
you
if
recommend?
we don't hold it, if we said January 1st, I think we'll be in some hot water with some of the restructuring that we've done across the county. So I think 7/1 would be our optimal date. And that's usually what we like to do, is grab everything 7/1. That's given the first 6 months of the year completely done. And then I don't think there's too many more changes coming in the next 2 weeks. So we'll have a really good clean picture of where we are in the middle of this year, going into next year.
So with the restructuring, how many people did we increase from January 1 to 7/1?
A few positions, we'll have to look that up and we can bring that to you, but
Handful,
I don't think there's that many.
less than 10 probably.
But on the flip side of it is, if you use the 7/1, then there's a lot of unfilled positions out there too.
so that's the
Yeah,
other
some of our
pieces
major
we'll be looking
departments.
at is all of our sheriff's vacancies or detention
services.
vacancies, potential vacancies in the clerk's office, because they seem to always have a lot of flexibility.
Prosecutor is another one.
Prosecutor constantly cycles. So we'll get a really good picture of where we are as soon to them submitting their budgets as possible. So
Well,
yeah,
and
it's huge.
I don't think we're saying that they have to hold at the level that they don't have filled positions, because we've budgeted for those filled positions. So I would say that for them, it would be at the filled position number. But I would also still like to know, like, I guess I'm just trying to figure out what restructuring happened and so what jobs were increased for that. So, which is a separate issue.
Yeah.
Well, so to piggyback on what Mary just said, is that, so which are we asking them to hold at the filled positions or hold at the budgeted positions?
The authorized.
Authorized, budgeted, gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, that's what I thought. I was gonna say, if it's just the filled ones, that
Not good.
that's what's gonna make the phone start ringing, not the 3%. The 3% they'll be fine with. It'll be the filled position. Oh, wow. Okay.
I do think the commissioners are going to want to retain the latitude to recognize in some of our departments that have a larger head count and a number of unfilled positions, doing a realistic projection of what it would take
Yeah, no,
timing wise to fill those.
definitely, but it's just when we say we're gonna hold it at a number, we need to hold it that FTE number. But that doesn't mean that they're not, we still shouldn't graduate in the budget for it based on them filling those positions. Just because it's a vacant position doesn't mean they get another $100,000 into their budget on January 1.
Yes. Amen.
So where, I mean, obviously the one we're gonna get the greatest amount of conversation with is Ozzy. Where is he at with regard to his vacancies and what he's got filled, and what does he have in the pipeline? Because remember, it takes several months from the time he starts until they're here. So how do we reflect what he's got in the pipeline?
And we can work that with civil services. So they keep monthly tallies as to what they've hired, what the turnover has been, how many they have in the pipeline, what process of the pipeline they're in. So they send me a monthly report letting me know as of 3 days ago, we didn't have any pipelines, but last month we had 4 pipelines, right? So that kind of ebbs and flows based on where they're at. So we can work with Ashley Torres to get some, and they track all that, some real projections of how many are they really hiring per month? What does that pipeline look like? And then on the flip side, what is the exit rate that we're seeing and how does that balance?
Yeah, and the jail would be in the same boat, Ashley, because we have a lag on our personnel as well, so.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, Mike can help us with our correction officers. And again, it's not you're not gonna get them you're not gonna get the positions if you have the ability to fill them. It is just do a realistic look. If you have 300 authorized positions, but you're at 280 today, what's a reasonable timeline to fill those things? And let's budget for it. So you have a trajectory to get to there, but let's do a realistic budget on it, and not assume on January 1, all 300 positions are filled.
Yeah.
Because that absorbs budget capacity that can be utilized elsewhere.
So elsewhere, exactly.
So are we talking about a 3% cap applying to across the board instead of just specifically M&O?
I think what I heard is FTE capped at your authorized positions for 2022 budget. And then the 3% cap on non-personnel expenses, M&O.
And all capital submitted separately.
Mhm.
Yeah, we were talking about capital. Yeah. Does that fit the bill?
And we were saying July 1 FTE count.
And then, yeah, we've read all the union contracts and we're building in all of the pieces that we can build in, all the modifiers that apply, bomb squad pay, K9 pay, all the extra pays.
All of those escalators are going to be built into the positional budgeting.
So essentially, you'll already have the positional budgeting loaded for the departments.
Correct. They'll review for any major inaccuracies. And then we'll determine what needs to be corrected and doesn't.
A component of the cost of the salaries, wages, and benefits is on the benefits side. The potential cost increase to the county on the medical insurance side.
And we're looking at taking a small increase. It's pretty early in the year, so as we continue to watch what's happening, we started fairly flat, but we've seen some pretty decent escalation in the last couple of months. So we're projecting hopefully a county size small increase. We still have really good reserves, so we're comfortable, but we don't want to get ourselves in a hole potentially where then we're too far behind. And then as we've been having conversation, really determining, based on what COLA's coming at, can we put any of the increase on our employees, right? Because if they take an increase, depending on what their COLA is, that impacts them as well. So we're really looking at potentially just taking a very small county increase this year, knowing what's happening with inflation. Only to continue to ensure that our reserves are protected in the event that we get hit with some really major claims over the next 6 months.
So should we build in as a cushion a 3% on the medical increase
think
on the
so.
county?
On the county side.
Yeah,
So we'll build that into positional budgeting.
Yeah.
As it relates to 23.
and dental, we're still looking at it, it's something probably very similar.
And that way it's built in and we don't have to go back and change our minds later. It's already shown to the departments and calculated and planned for, and I think that's a good assumption.
So you probably want to have that in the letter as well.
And so some of these, we provide some supplemental information to our department enterers. And we give them kind of a breakdown of all the benefits that are applied. And what rates they're applied at, so they can double check that, you know, oh, somebody on Kaiser full family, that cost is showing up correctly. And so a lot of departments review all of that as well.
So maybe just a general sentence to say that you're including all of that and the details are in the supplemental attachment or something like that, just so that the departments aren't going, you've already increased, you know, so do I have more room or not? So.
So, from the medical side, where are we sitting with regard to reserves in that account?
Jason, would you pull up the cash
Yeah.
balance?
Last we were pretty good. I was trying to figure out the months. It looked like we were about 10 months when I was looking. But the formulas weren't in it like I was used to getting the reports in the past. So I was trying to back my way in, honestly.
Okay.
We did take a pretty good month for the month of May, and I did a little research. It's due to 4 claimants this year that have some pretty significant medical impact, and they're going to continue to based on the reason code. So I don't have access to see who it is, right? But I can ask what type of claims are impacting us. So knowing those 4 claims, I think we're going to continue to see some pretty large payments for the rest of the year.
We don't have a surplus in that account. At one time, we had
At one time we had, very, very
Very-
healthy.
very healthy
Balance.
reserves and stuff, but that we would have.
We've managed it more appropriately.
Okay, all right.
And manage it through having lower increases to our employees.
Correct.
And some we had to just let go. Just-
We'll talk a little about capital, Gary.
Yeah, when we're taking a look at the supplemental submissions, and taking a look at how we will accept asks from departments that involve capital. What we plan to do is develop a spreadsheet or a template that we will send to all the departments so that if they have a supplemental request, it'll come in an orderly, organized manner and a standardized manner so we could see them. And then especially focusing on the capital component of it, what their capital requests would be so that we can isolate that. And so the discussion I think that we need to have here is what would that dollar cutoff amount be? So for instance, if they feel like they have some budget within their regular M&O for repairs or minor things, that they need a new desk or something like that, you don't want that to be part of that total capital discussion on what's being requested or needed to be funded. So we should probably set a little higher threshold on that and get that whole capital aspect of what we need in the future also ascertained. So I would suggest that we have a capital threshold if they're wanting to pay for it in their regular budget and they keep within the 3%, they're fine. But if the capital ask is say over $10,000, then it needs to be in the supplemental, or you can toggle that number anywhere you want, but that's what I'd start suggesting as a minimum.
So if we are moving to docking stations for employees as opposed to offices and their own desk and stuff, why would we be buying more furniture?
I don't know that we would be.
Okay,
Other than the commissioner's offices.
The new commissioners, yes, maybe.
Right, so where the new spaces that we use 2023, I think it's the commissioner's offices.
Well, I think we just have the new commissioners bring their own furniture.
There's furniture on the fourth floor we can repurpose,
I
absolutely.
was just, yes, exact. There is so much unused furniture just laying around. We can cobble some stuff together.
I think that the capital stuff in my mind is more of software, major building renovations, facilities improvements. You know, they're larger ticket items that want your visibility on them. Investments that we need to make, you know, an ERP system into the future as well. I think the small dollar stuff. I mean, we've got for our equipment stuff, we've got ER&R, people build that into their M&O budgets and whatnot, but I would suggest it's like the $100,000 and above sort of capital that are pretty significant asks that are needed to be planned for in our 6-year capital plan. I'd like to go farther than this year and say, start to think about your out, you know, this year and your next 5 years. And again, put it into the department heads and the other electeds role of saying, you help us prioritize, identify the type of project needed, the estimated dollar amount and the timing of it, so that we can feed that into our 6-year plan. And then from that, again, it goes back to, we look at the budget roll-ups, we see what kind of capacity we've got. We determine, in addition to COLAs and other investments in capital, how much of that requested capital amount can be absorbed into the 2023 budget. And then how much are we looking out in the future years? A 6-year is not locked in stone. A 6-year is fluid. Usually your first year is the one that you're budgeting for into your operating budget. The next year's, depending on availability, some could move out, some could move forward, depending on priorities. Some could emerge and require something to accelerate forward and push a couple things back. But it gives us the visibility across the county of what we might be expecting, what the commissioners might need to be thinking about for budgeting and into the out years.
Go ahead.
So when I had the opportunity to attend the budgeting for Boise, one of the things that they did, I don't know whether they're still doing it now, but it's similar to our ERR. They would develop a 5-year and a 10-year capital budget, and then they'd create a sinking fund to fund that and stuff. So as opposed to, you know, and I know that puts budgetary strain on you on an annual basis, but it also makes sure that you've got the funds necessary to pay for those capital expenditures when they come around and stuff. So I don't expect that we'll ever move into that quickly, but I still think that that's a good way. I mean, we do it in our ERR
Gary
account.
talked about it, you know, trying
Yeah,
to set up that capital reserve.
We create a capital reserve account to do exactly like you're talking about. And we have a mechanism to start building on it. So we have a starting point and nest to build on, and then you have a policy around what the applicable uses would be. And this would be a good year to seriously consider funding a capital improvement project fund.
I think that's always the hardest thing, is the year one starting, because you have to seed it.
Right.
It's an absolute great budgeting philosophy and sustainability to get into. You've got to have that ability to advance seed at the front. And I think Gary's right. I think we have an opportunity this year to do that.
Over and above what your current next year's needs was going to be. So that's a different discussion than what your 23 budget is going to incorporate per se.
And I think, so I'm with Scott in that the capital should be true capital items.
100,000 threshold.
Well, I don't know what that threshold is. I mean, so that, I think we need to look at what best practices are for it. But what I don't want is normal equipment that needs to be repurchased every 3 to 5 years should not be part of that. That should be part of the normal operations, because computers are not capital items anymore. So I mean, I want capital to truly be capital, and the rest of it should be within their budgets. And that's how we know that they're able to work within their budget or not. And if they need supplemental to then get them, but then that's what they've got to start to plan for in the future is that within their budgets, that, you know, it's their equipment, but they can't keep coming back to us every year to say, oh, we need this equipment, unless it's truly capital, that they've got to start to figure out that within their budgets. And I think they have, So I mean, so that's why I'm not thinking that they should be coming to us if they've got to change an office and they're choosing to do furniture. That's their choice within their budget. And a lot of them. And same thing with, we spent, over with CARES dollars, got everybody up to date. They've got to start to think about what that, if they need to replace things, what that means to their departments.
Yeah, and since the budget letter is just a construct of you yourselves here in Spokane County, it doesn't have any bearing on accounting conventions or anything else. So you can set that threshold at whatever you want in terms of how you want to see it organized as supplemental requests. And so
Right,
the bigger the better, probably.
Yeah, so it's like I said, what I think for capital is truly capital. The rest of it is supplemental requests if they need.
100,000.
Well, I think does it meet the capital requirements? I mean, is it?
That's
something-
$10,000.
That's from federal purposes, I think, right?
We capitalize anything more than $10,000.
So we'll still capitalize anything $10,000 and above. What I'm saying
We
is,
wanna
for
capture
the
our
purpose of this letter, when you're looking at supplemental requests, where do you want to take that? You could take it up to $1 million if you want.
I guess what I'm trying to say, it depends on the item. I mean, so setting a dollar threshold is gonna be hard because what I don't want is if they have to remodel an office and that's a capital request. I mean, if we've got to buy new election machines, that's a capital request because that's,
So how do you convey that in a budget letter?
I'm asking you to help. Figure that,
Well-
that's what we're trying to brainstorm and figure it out.
Okay, my suggestion was a dollar amount, but if that doesn't work, you have to then prescribe what circumstances or what categories that you want to include in that type of supplemental and what amounts.
I'd say my suggestion is you start either at 50 or 100. And again, you stipulate it's not routine sort of replacement things. It is, singular investments that are being made for, and give some examples like you're replacing an air handler on top of the facility, you're replacing a software technology in one of the departments.
One time versus non-routine?
Yeah, non-routine, yes. Routine versus non-routine. You never say an air handler is one time, but essentially in people's minds, like, yeah, that is a single point in time expense that you're not expecting to replace for another 10 to 20 years.
A life expectancy?
I don't know that I can get into that detail.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't define it by a dollar amount, what would happen if you defined it by a life expectancy, say anything that's got a useful life over 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, pick a number. But that way you.
And a threshold, useful life.
Well, what I'm trying to do is figure out, if you're not gonna define it by a number, then define it by some other metric. And another metric for capital expenditures is useful life. That's all I was trying to get to, so.
Whatever you guys want.
Why don't we noodle that around a little bit and we'll come back with a recommendation.
I would also ask on the supplemental that we'll put out in the template that if they have more than one type of capital request, that they prioritize what those capital requests are. So we have it in their priority order.
Yeah, priority and year.
And yeah, based on the year, on a 5-year plan.
Okay, this supplemental budget, yeah, okay. So if we're having the supplemental capital component of the submission template being built, then that capital requests will be a 6-year time frame. So we will specify that they have to show not only 23, but the next 5 years after that.
Because I mean, that's what we've tried to do in the past when we had, I don't know, 2015 when I came on. We try to come up with a 5-6 year capital plan and try to have departments start to think out. Because they weren't at that point in time. I think they're starting to try to think more like that. But that's why it's just important to kind of keep that going if we're going to try to fund a capital replacement fund. that we need to know
what those are, sure.
what those are, so we have some kind of
After we have those
basis.
submissions, then you can take a look at it in its totality.
Right,
You can kind of
And
do
it's-
some screening of it and then say, geez, we were thinking of a fund here, but now it looks like we need to seed it at this amount.
yeah, because otherwise we have no way to know what the seeding amount is unless we get some kind of idea from them. And again, prioritized as well. So that's, to me, I see it as, there's two separate supplementals. It's the capital supplemental, and then it's the, supplemental just to their normal operating budget.
Well,
'Cause if
we'll
they-
break that down into two components too, the personnel related and then the M&O. So we can scrutinize each category independently too. When we have all the departments, so you can say, we'll roll out all of the supplementals up so you can see it in its totality by each of those categories. That would be informative, I think. Personnel and M&O. So, let's see, we've got inflation covered in terms of some verbiage in there. In an effort to curb inflationary pressures on citizens, we want to hold cost increases to 3%. We also want to note that we have uncertainty of future revenues and we expect an increase in unfunded mandates. So those are the general themes that we'll incorporate into the letter.
Yeah, I guess, don't we know that we have some unfunded mandates that are coming down in 2023? I think there was some stuff through the courts again.
I think it would be a rare year when you would not have it.
Right.
Unfunded
I mean,
mandate.
so I feel like we're not anticipating, we know that there's unfunded mandates that
Continue to.
continue placed upon us.
I thought the language we were discussing around the uncertainty was the uncertainty of what sales tax was going to look like. Not necessarily, I mean, we can include the unfunded mandate line, but I mean, a big uncertainty is if, like was stated earlier, if we are headed into a recession, I mean, we're going to see a drop in sales tax revenue.
So we can specifically note that there's an uncertainty of future sales tax revenues.
I think that, I don't think many people would disagree with that.
I mean, I would think I would build that in. I mean, I know in the 2021 letter, I mean, we did specifically state combined with significant unfunded legislative mandates impacting our criminal justice system. Was one of the things we talked about. So, I mean, that's why, I mean, I think that's still valid today. Going into 23, I don't think it's, we're guessing, I think it's a valid statement still.
And I think even a comment that says, most economists are pointing to the eventuality of a recession.
Yeah, mid-23.
Yeah,
maybe.
I think that's just the reality of what we're dealing with.
I think that's the way to put it, that most economists are.
Yep, it's not us, it's most economists are. And with recessions comes uncertainty and different pressures on our operating budgets.
And I think our current budgets are doing pretty well for the departments. I mean, I think, we're not asking them to cut. My first year, we were asking them to cut 10% from their budgets, so.
I want to go 20% this year.
No, so I think, say we're not asking to hold the line, we're asking, we're letting them go at 3%. But knowing that there are things, so I guess we are, asking the inflationary times to hold the line, but in the past, I mean, it's been cuts or no increase. So.
So Gary, can I ask a question on 100,000? So a couple of the projects that I'm looking at, well, one is the remodel of the kitchen out of Geiger. Those are pretty substantial projects. And I'm sure there'll be over 100. Does that come in a way of a supplemental? Is that what you're saying? Okay, just want to make sure. Yeah,
Yeah, that'd be part of your supplemental capital.
okay,
So would updating a jail module. I know you guys like to refresh the floors every few years. Any module redo would be a capital request as well.
okay, sounds good.
Think about it, Mike, just to help us all plan for what next year's and future years' capital needs realistically might look like. It gives us and the public an eye towards where those funding needs may be at.
Okay, yeah, I certainly could do that. I was just trying to wrap my mind around it because when you say prioritize them, there's a lot of prioritization that has to happen. It's not all at one building and so forth, but I'll do my best to probably put all those numbers together. So,
You guys want to tackle a section on what your funding priorities are for 2023?
Or do you want supplementals to drive that based off of what the departments are submitting?
I mean, I think it's hard to say what our funding priorities are when we don't know what we haven't funded, because I think we funded a lot of our priorities this last year. And so the budgets, like the sheriff's department budget is, he's at the capacity point, other than I think some of his capital items where, I mean, he can't get the people in. I mean, that's the true need right now, is getting people in to fill those positions. I think, Mike, the priority is to get your positions filled. But I mean, that, beyond that, it's like until the departments come and let us know that there's other funding priorities that they need. I mean, that's what I see is the.
A lot of entities, what they do is in a general sense, without referring to dollars or anything else, that just shows the intent of what the elected officials consider to be important. They're not committing to a dollar amount. They're just saying, these are our priorities for the 2023 budget as it relates to what you want to do, what type of service you'd want to provide. It gives you a platform to be able to express that to the public.
My priorities would be public safety and economic development to get us out of the oncoming recession.
So those are kind of generalized terms that you don't.
What you asked for.
Right, and that's good, that gives you a good intent in terms of setting the table in terms of the direction. And it gives a focal point too. So if your focal point and overriding ethos here is expressed as those types of things, then that's how I would start that whole premise of the narrative budget letter. It makes sense that way, it flows that way. That you're looking with an eye toward these things being very important to you. And so I'm hoping to engender a good discussion amongst yourselves about what your thoughts are.
Well, with the amount of fear that is out there with regard to public safety, I think that is, the two things that I hear people most concerned about is their budget and their safety and stuff. So if we're addressing the issue of budget by holding the line and we are invested into their public safety, I don't know. The only other thing is what can we do to get out of this situation, and that's more jobs and economic opportunities. So I don't know what else is missing.
I mean, it's like, again, public safety is the number one, people feeling safe is the number one priority of what I'm hearing as well. Josh, you're out and about.
You two are spot on. I agree with everything you're saying. It's what I'm hearing. It's what I believe. Yeah, I think we're all three on the same page on this.
Yeah, it's public safety. Inflation's the other one, that people are just starting to, the price of gas. I mean, those things that we don't have a lot of control over, but whatever we can, do to help, those are the the two things that I think are most important that I'm hearing.
Inflation's a tough one. To say that your priority is to curb inflation probably isn't.
Right, no, as commissioners, we really can't. I mean,
No, you
there's not
can't.
a lot that we
But-
can do.
But you can, public safety is something that you can specifically address, and it does fall under your purview. So if we list your number one priority is public safety, do you want to expound upon that in any way within the letter?
So I don't know what you guys have been using, but from my standpoint, what I've been saying is I want to keep you, your family and your business safe. Because a lot of people don't know what public safety is. Is that a fire truck? Is that EMS? Is that the sheriff? But if I just say, I want to keep you, your family and your business safe, boy, that covers it. So
I don't think that's what we want to put. I mean, we can talk about public safety as priority here in the letter to department heads. To me, that's a different issue than the letter that we're addressing to our department heads. So I guess I'm trying
But
to
it's an
figure out.
integral part of the budget process is what I'm saying. And if you're defining it a little bit off the start, then even the people in the departments that are crafting their budget have an eye toward that's why you're going to be making future decisions in terms of the entire budget.
what would happen if we change the rhetoric that say, we're committed to keep our citizens safe? Public, unless you're a government wonk, you don't know what public safety is. But you know what it means when my kids are not feeling safe or when I'm not feeling safe. So maybe we just say, we want to keep you and your family safe.
I think,
We want to keep our citizens safe.
right. And that's a priority and the departments
Yeah.
can look at what that means for them. Because each, Mike's, detention services may look at it a little bit different than what the sheriff's office and the courts may look at it a little bit different than the prosecutors. So I think that's enough for them to know that if they can make a case that they need more money to do that, we would be looking at that. And I think the other thing is customer service to our citizens, through planning and permitting, and so I guess if we're gonna try to, narrow it down to two things, it's gonna be, keeping our citizens safe and customer service.
You're already signaling in part of the opening remarks about, while inflation's not necessarily directly within your control, what you're trying to be thoughtful on managing the county budget to be good fiscal stewards for our community and try to keep that cost, that rising cost shrunk down. You could add it on to roads and infrastructure, multimodal ways of getting our community, being thoughtful around how we're preparing for the continued Spokane being a known place that people want to be. So how do we think over our infrastructure? Those are important as well. It's another idea.
But from a truly budget perspective, we're limited to what we have in the road fund. So I mean, so we, so again, and I want to budget anticipating not doing a shift, not doing a 1% increase.
And that goes back to fiscal responsibility overall.
Yes, so I mean, we need to be ensuring that our budget is looking at it from that perspective. This time.
Ensuring a fiscally sound budget.
Yeah, well, and we say we need to ensure a balanced budget. So.
How about ensuring a fiscally sound foundation for this year and future years?
I mean, we can say that. I think, obviously we're gonna have to get another draft and kind of look through it. I mean, I know this letter is gonna be public, but it's also addressing it to our department heads to make sure that they know where we wanna be.
Any other thoughts on additions on this or any other things that you want to incorporate into the budget line?
I think we've hit on a lot of stuff. I'd like to see a draft. We've thrown a lot of stuff out. I'm a little worried we may be creeping on to page 3 of this letter now. So we may want to pump the brakes and just call it good. I think we put a lot of stuff out there. So
We could save ink by going to a smaller font.
maybe.
Yeah, we want the budget letter to be concise enough so as it's not ambiguous in giving directions to the departments. But it also sets the tone of what you as commissioners are looking for too, specifically.
I think it's gonna be setting a much better tone than the letter last year, so we're already, further ahead, I think, on
Who
that.
signed last year's letter?
We drafted last year's letter.
So I mean, so I think we're making, definitely making progress and strides on where we're at. But I'm with Josh, at this point, I think we've said a lot that we kind of got to see how it's really fitting into that letter.
So I think we're gonna, if I hear you guys right, you probably want some more massaging as it relates to guidance for capital submissions, right? With non-routine types of expenditures and some narratives on those kind of issues.
Somehow you've got to define that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you guys can help figure that out.
Yep. We'll give you something back to react to on the revised draft letter.
Just on another note too, since we were starting to talk about reserves for capital, we should start planning on having discussions around future reserves for restricted reserves and policies that are set around those. But also, now would be a good time, if you do have the time, to take a look at scheduling future workshops as it relates to the next topic of conversation might be how we will predict our 23 revenues relating to both property tax and sales tax. The sales tax is going to be the big component of that. And so that's what I'd like to try to schedule for the next workshop whenever you're available.
Would it be helpful if we put together a list of topical items and dates starting, we're middle of June right now, starting throughout July, that says on this Tuesday morning, we're going to focus on these revenue categories. On this Tuesday morning, we'll focus on these other revenue categories. This Tuesday morning, we'll focus on capital, focus on reserves, and sequence some topical items out so that we kind of bucket them in and you know kind of what we're going to be focusing on. That'd be helpful.
I think so. I think we know we've got Tuesday mornings available to do this. I would say though, if we, to make sure we can put more together than just having it one topic by topic to. put more.
Yeah. Group some stuff.
So we use the full morning.
Okay.
And probably after the 15th of July, we should be able to run some preliminary numbers for the first 6 months of the year in terms of actuals. So that'll give us more of a basis to start the discussions off to see where we're at and as it relates to where we're going and on those future revenue predictions. Okay.
You guys okay with that?
So maybe the 19th.
So it would be informative to find out from the school districts, what school districts plan on construction next year. Are there, because those projects theoretically have already got funding, so they should happen. A lot of the contractors have work booked through the first quarter or two of next year, so I don't think we're going to see a slowdown in construction until the third or fourth quarter. But there will be a slowdown. So it just, let's give our best wisdom as to each one of those categories and what does that look like for the next 18 months. That makes sense.
Yep, you're thinking from kind of feeding the sales tax.
See the sales
Engine,
tax.
yep.
And all back into a number that says, realistically, maybe we only see a 2 or 3% increase in sales tax as opposed to, what are we running at now, about 5 or 6?
Something like that.
Yeah, so we're gonna see some retraction. But how much, how much is already built in for 23 and how much is unknown?
Yeah.
So,
Well, and some of that too, I mean, like AGC, their economist, have a pretty good idea of what he's seeing nationally. And then he breaks it down into the different states and stuff. So I mean, so I would think like ABC, AGC, home builders would kind of have some preliminary assessments as to what they think is gonna be happening in 2023.
Do we know, has the state economist, well, I don't know when his last revenue forecast was, and I don't know if either of you have. I mean, it's easy to check. We can check their website, but I haven't. Have either of you heard anything? Or know when the next forecast comes out?
No,
Yeah, I don't know.
but that'd be worth checking on.
We had a conversation with Dr. Lurch, who is an advisory to that council for the state. And he was cautious a little bit about 23, but I can reach out to him for an update prior to the next workshop.
well, we know that there's gonna be a retraction in recreational vehicles, RVs and all that kind of stuff. ARP money and CARES money drove a lot of that stuff and that's dried up. So I imagine there's gonna be some retrenchment in the RV market. I would imagine auto sales are probably also gonna get impacted. So, and those are two big drivers for sales tax. So,
Well, I think the auto sales, I mean, you're seeing a lot of that already just because of the lack of inventory.
yeah.
They're not there to buy. Yeah, so.
Well, and they still, so just FYI, I ordered my new truck in December and now I'm told it'll be here in July. So 7 months to get a new vehicle, and the biggest thing is chips.
Yeah.
Chips and paper are the two big, so that's gonna continue to drive into next year.
Commissioner CUNY and I were at the opening of the new Tesla facility out in Liberty Lake, and somebody said something like, yeah, I'd like to buy one. And they said, well, we can order one for you and get it to you next year. And
Yeah.
it's wow. I mean, so.
Did
Yeah,
they
it's
go up substantially to a price?
I think they went up some. But I think we're gonna see too, even a slowdown in that with interest rates. As people are financing and with interest rates going up, we're gonna start to see a slowdown there as well. So,
Yeah, 0% interest rate on buying a new vehicle is gone.
yeah, or even a 1.9% anymore is
Yeah,
not
it's-
there.
Yeah.
So,
Some of the dealers aren't even offering financing anymore.
Yeah.
So,
so there's just a lot to be taken into account as to what we think is gonna drive it. I think, some of the economists are gonna be helpful to talk to.
The next state is on or before November 20th.
Okay, not till November.
They do it differently on an even number of years,
Yeah.
but for even number of years, last one was on or before February 20th, the next one will be November.
so did you guys see the report? I think it was on last night about shrinkflation. Where actually now the size of the commodities you've been buying are shrinking. Like for instance, Gatorade went from a 32 ounce to a 28 ounce and kept the price the same. So Tesla is going from a 4-seater to a 3-seater. Price is the same.
And with bag of chips is going smaller.
Bag of chips is all but a bag of chips. Yeah.
So yeah,
Ice cream, orange juice, everything has been this container size shrinks, your number of fluid ounces, your number of whatever happens to be is down.
Well, for decades, 3/4 of a bag of chips is just air anyway. I mean, that's nothing new. So
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments? I know we have a couple executive sessions that we need to do.
Nope, I think that just gives us enough fodder here to start, like I said, drafting up and crafting a narrative here, and then we'll get that out right away sometime this week to let you guys review it.
Okay, and do you want us to look at it like on Monday?
Yeah, if you could.
Monday
please.
would be a holiday.
Oh, Tuesday.
Tuesday.
And then on the subsequent workshops, knowing that August 8th is when we believe we'll have, partly to have the department submissions done. We have some of the pre-work that we can do in the preceding weeks for that are not dependent upon the budget, like revenue, like some of the reserves and other discussions on there. So that's what we'll kind of lay out some proposed dates and times and topical items for you to all take a look at as well.
And then on the two executive session items, is there anticipated any action?
Yes, potentially you could come out and take action, or you could take action this afternoon if you'd like. On the DOH rule in particular.
We can do it this afternoon, so that way we can just adjourn after
Absolutely.
executive session.
Yeah, we can just take this up this afternoon if you'd like.
Okay,
I would imagine, so it's 2 executive sessions based on pending and potential litigation pursuant to RCW 4230 110 1I. That's regarding the BOH rule and Juneteenth. 15 minutes on each.
okay, and who do you anticipate to be in the executive sessions?
The executive management team, commissioners, I'd like, is Jeff part of the executive management team?
Yes.
Great, I want to make sure Jeff's here, and me, of course, for
Okay.
legal representation,
Very good, and how long did you say total for the two?
15 on each.
15 on each. So we'll be in executive session for 30 minutes. When we come out, we will adjourn for the morning and we will reconvene at our 2 o'clock consent agenda meeting.
The action will be at the 2 o'clock consent agenda.
Yes, and any action will take place at the 2 o'clock consent agenda. So it is 10:14. By the time we get this all done, it'll be 10:15, so we'll be until 10:45. Thank you very much.